Welcome to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda, the podcast for people-centric leaders, business owners, and HR professionals who know that people are at the heart of business success. Join me and industry experts as we explore the key aspects of building a thriving company, sharing cutting-edge strategies, impactful insights, and the latest trends to help you ignite your business growth. It's time to rev up your leadership, rev up your success. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Rev Up Your Business. Today my guest is Yusuf Khoja, and we are going to talk entrepreneurship. So if you're interested in learning the kind of behind the scenes building of a company and anecdotal stories and tips and strategies, stay tuned. Today we're going to talk about beyond the startup phase, what it really takes to grow. And my guest, as I said, is Yusuf Khoja. He is an author, an international keynote speaker, and a leadership resilience coach. For 30 plus years, Yusuf has been involved in producing and presenting at international leadership and wellness events featuring notable thought leaders and business icons such as Oprah Winfrey, former President Bill Clinton, Tony Robbins, and Dr. Deepak Chopra. He's built his business and had up to a team of 30 staff. So we're going to go and we're going to talk about entrepreneurship, and we're going to share our stories, both his and mine, about entrepreneurship and growing. Welcome.
Thank you, Hilda. It's a pleasure to be here.
So glad to have you. When we first talked about, what should we talk about? Should we talk about resilience? Should we talk about things? And as you were telling me your entrepreneurship story and your comfort level to talk about the challenges and the successes, it didn't hurt that you rubbed elbows with the likes of Bill Clinton and Oprah Winfrey. But seriously, the entrepreneurship, I thought, here's somebody who has grown their business. It's not just a solopreneur or just a team of 5. And so we can have a heart-to-heart talk and have people learn about some of the ins and outs of entrepreneurship, things that they wish they knew, like we wish we knew, before we embarked on our journey. So I guess what I'd like to start with is letting people get to know a little bit about our journeys, so it gives some context when we're talking about entrepreneurship. So you can start first.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me once again. It's interesting you talk about entrepreneurship. When I went down the path of exploring that, it was not intentional. My undergrad studies were in law and psychology, and my intention, graduating from university, was to enter law school because in my cultural background, you became a professional. You didn't become an entrepreneur. I wrote the LSAT 3 times, not because I liked writing it, because I had that much difficulty in passing that exam. I had no idea what the challenge was, but sometimes challenges are the universe's way of saying, perhaps you should look at another path. And my older brother, who was a serial entrepreneur, had already made his decision that he was going down the path of pursuing a relationship with Tony Robbins. Now, back then, we're talking about the early 1990s, you would have a chance to go see Tony Robbins in person, and he launched a franchise where if you qualified, you could purchase a territorial right, and then you would have the chance to deliver what is now webinars, or precursor to webinars. These are pre-recorded sessions on video, and you'd facilitate them, and you receive all your training through his team in San Diego. Given that I was having a challenge with writing the LSAT, I decided that I would join my brother because the other interest I had was psychology. And the one thing that resonated with me about Tony Robbins and the likes of Deepak Chopra and others is that they believe that fundamentally you are in control of your destiny. And I really like that messaging. So indirectly, I entered the entrepreneurial world through a franchise, and we would go out to the market. Our territory was in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And we go to businesses door to door. There was no internet. The cell phone had just been invented, and the fax machine was still 2 years away. So it was very much old school of picking up the phone and talking to people. The benefit of having some of the trainings of Tony early in the years is that it taught me communication skills, the importance of establishing rapport. I was only 20 years old at the time, and I was speaking with people who were 30, 40 years old. So much more experience. And I had no idea how to run a business, and they were already running their own. Sometimes we call that the imposter syndrome. And for those who may be looking to enter the entrepreneurship field for the first time, you're probably going to go through this. And that is actually a good thing to experience. Nevertheless, we pursued despite some obstacles in early days, and we grew that franchise to become the most successful one in North America, which earned us the right to work with Tony directly in promoting his live events. In order to do so, we scaled up, grew that business, and at one point we were doing almost 50% of his events in the United States and 100% of the events in Canada. And then fundamentally, as we scaled up the business and hired more people, we decided that we would expand our reach internationally and expand the program from one speaker, that being Tony, to being multiple speakers, and entered into relationships with some of the folks you had mentioned, former President Bill Clinton, Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Deepak Chopra, and we grew the business to host live events in places like Abu Dhabi and Dubai, as well as explore markets like India and, of course, the United States. Having said that, we encountered many challenges, the financial crisis being one of them. Members of our family who were part of our business passed away. And of course, we faced our own financial hurdles along the way. And the one thing that I realized in retrospect is that drives performance is our capacity to be resilient, because you can have all the tools for success. You may even have the financial backing, but it doesn't mean that the road is going to be a smooth one. And so having said that, I decided to use the experience of almost 30 years of being in this business to focus on resilience, because I see it as the superpower that all entrepreneurs have. Intrinsically, whether they're utilizing it or not is up to them, but I want to be able to give them the tools to maximize their capacity to bounce back and to chart a course that leads them to progress and success down the road. And that's how I ended up where I am today.
Well, as I introduced you as a resilience coach, it makes total sense. And we're going to get into kind of some of that roller coaster journey that you had. Let me then share a little bit about mine, and then we'll get into some of these areas that we want to talk about to help entrepreneurs understand the successes, but definitely understand those challenges. So my parents had a grocery store. I never thought I was the entrepreneur. My husband was the entrepreneur, and I was the back office team executing his dreams and making sure the stability of the organization. But so one day I was finishing my master's. I went back for my GMATs when I was 20 years after graduation. I always wanted a state-of-the-art master's when my kids were going back to school, and I had the state-of-the-art master's and launch my second career because I wanted to make sure I had time for my children. And I was pregnant with the last one, and I thought, wait a minute, this is going to be another 6 years before I start my master's. And so I thought, not going to do that. We're going to start. And I remember saying to my husband, I'm thinking of going back for my master's. And he said, oh, when? I says, maybe in September. So I wrote my GMAT. I had to remember my math, my math from 20 years before. So spent a lot of time figuring all this stuff. So I did pretty good, and I got into my master's program, which was in health admin. And as I'm graduating, I took 2 courses every semester for 4 years with 3 kids, like all like little. And I thought, what am I going to do with my newfound master's? And my husband said, I'm thinking of starting a company. So 2 people, and I like to say, I started 2 weeks after him because somebody had to pay him. So I was the payroll clerk within 2 weeks. But we grew that business 10 within the first year, and we just steadily continued to grow it till we sold it 13 years later. We had 125 people, 7 offices across Canada. So that's a lot of people, a lot of payroll, a lot of different aspects, which we will kind of talk about when we talk about our employees. And one thing we always wanted to do was create a place where people loved what they did, loved where they work. And we got to do it from scratch. And we actually did it. And we were recognized by Best Workplaces in Canada, top 10 twice. So fast forward, I did ops whether it was finance or IT. I had a team helping me with HR, IT, all those aspects. But of all the things that I did from an operations perspective, it was the human resources side that I loved, and helping leaders to become effective leaders, to recruit, retain, and engage staff. So I started my current company 8 years ago, and I focus on leadership, self-confidence, and HR, creating those foundations. So I think maybe the first thing we can talk about is, we said this is beyond the startup phase. So when you're starting up and there's just you and your brother, or me and my husband, and then a few people and 10 people, what happens after that point where you say, I think we got a business here. I think we need to grow it. And what do we do? So share some of that part of your early part of the post-startup phase.
That is a very exciting period of time because you recognize that the uncertainty is starting to disappear a little bit, and there's revenue coming in, and you feel there's some element of sustainability that you can, hey, I can pay my bills and I can see somewhat of a future out of this, whereas before perhaps it was a question mark or a dream or a hobby that we're trying to materialize. The idea of growing your vision and having a sense of what the future is or what you'd like it to be, manifest is the word a lot of people use today, I think is strategically very important, and probably an area that a lot of people do not focus on, because now they're perhaps thinking about, how do I make more money? How do I deal with the advertising needs that are going to keep me relevant, which are all important. I think strategically, though, you have to have a sense of where you want to go and get excited by it. You have to remain excited throughout the process, because invariably there are going to be hiccups that are going to come up. Some are just a natural byproduct of perhaps industry factors, things like financial crisis, a pandemic, for example, which are out of your control. And others will be instigated through competition and so forth. Having a clear vision and something that excites you as a person, as a team, is that's going to help navigate those challenges, to give you that extra energy, vitality, and wherewithal to be resilient. And I remember Steve Jobs, this is years ago, in an interview he did, he said, you, as an entrepreneur, you have to have an insane passion for what it is you're doing, because no sane person would ever deal with the obstacles that are going to cross your path down the road. And it's funny, but it is so true. So once you go beyond the early stages, it's important to make sure that you have a vision. And even if it's not perfect or clear, that doesn't really matter. You can work on it, make sure that stays front and center, and build towards it. You'll have to weave and move around along the way, but that vision will act as a guiding post to keep you centered.
I so agree with that. At the time, I actually belonged to my hospital's board, and we actually had a retreat day, and they were talking about mission, vision, and values. And I thought, that's the foundation. And as Steve Jobs says, it's insane. Like, you have to be insanely passionate, because that's what keeps you going. And I think that it's so important to have that mission, vision, and values. And so when I said earlier, my husband and I dreamed, wouldn't it be nice if people love what they do and love where they work? And that premise, that foundation, resulted in the type of people that we hired, the type of culture that we wanted, and the kind of values that we had for our clients. We wanted our clients to, like, they were number one. And our original mission or values was that we will do whatever it takes, even if it kills us. And then we thought, maybe we should take the word kills us out of it. And so we modified it slightly. But all along the way, like, our company's name was iTrans, and we created our values to be very simple, 3 words. And they would follow the I. So if you're thinking of branding, I, insight, integrity, and innovation. And we even deliberately thought, how do we make sure people don't mix it up? And we made sure that it was a pyramid. The shortest word was first, and the longest word was last. So people could, if they had to figure it out, they knew from the fact that it was shortest to longest. So we made it easy, and they remembered it. Our staff remembered it and internalized it. So it's so important. And you really do have to be insanely passionate about what you do, because the the challenges that you face, it's so easy if you don't have a passion just to get out. I want to get out, right? But if you love what you do and you have a mission that you want, then you're going to ride those rough spots, right?
Absolutely. And just going back to that word passion, because it can mean a lot of different things to people. And how do I find my passion if I'm not entirely sure what it is? I think passion can be defined by what gets you up early in the morning and what keeps you up late. Passion can be defined by who am I becoming in the process? What am I able to learn about myself? What creativity and talents am I able to express? Who am I meeting? To your point, if you have those values, you're going to attract most likely those same values back. So it allows you to get really clear on what your life meaning is without getting too deep on the motivational side. And from that life meaning, you can then get a sense of clarity about what the future is going to be like because you have a sense of why for what you're about to do. And that sense of clarity allows you to focus in. And I'm a firm believer that where there is clear focus, the universe tends to deliver the resources or the pathway becomes a lot more apparent when we know what it is what we want.
And I think a piece of advice too would be when you're provided with an opportunity and it sounds like, wow, step back and say, does this align with my passion? Does it align with the vision that I have? Rather than, wow, this sounds like a quick scheme to get rich. And yeah, but it's not what I want to do. It's not what I'm interested in. I was a mentor for a women's group and we met monthly, like a mastermind. And one person, every month she came back, there was another new, shiny, bright object. I lost sight of what her core business was because each month she had something new that she was achieving. And I'm thinking, this person is just connecting with people and doing stuff, but not thinking, what do I want to do? And does this align with what I want to do? So that's certainly something that I want to share with those that are listening. You must have similar thoughts on that, Yusuf.
Yeah, it really comes down to being self-aware. And I think in North American society, and I don't want to generalize too much, so I'm going to offer your audience to take this with a grain of salt. We live in a society where we measure ourselves based on what we see around us in a large part. What kind of cars do we drive? Where do we live in the neighborhood? How often do we vacation? Where do we vacation? What are we wearing? And we're so focused on having in order to define our sense of value and so that we can be happy. And there was an author I read a number of years ago, Sakti Gawain, who wrote the book, The Creative Visualizations. He talked about we need to focus on being first, being happy, being fulfilled, being on purpose with regards to what makes us feel creative or contributing to the society. When we can enter that place of being, then our actions will be determined by that. So we don't have to focus on what do we do or how do I figure this out. These actions will reveal themselves because we're going to have clarity or self-awareness. And then the things that are naturally going to come to us will happen anyway, whether it's the cars or the vacation or the travel. So we're not defining ourselves by how soon can I have these material growths. We are self-aware and happy in the process of every day doing something that we love, knowing that the end results will come in good time. And to your point, I don't think entrepreneurs really focus on that because it's not really taught, but it's a huge distinctive advantage for those who get that message and act upon it.
When people recognize what you just said, things will flow easier. When people are just chasing that profit, that's just not the right recipe for success. And when it doesn't happen, it becomes like even more stressful for entrepreneurs. So, believe in what you're doing and allow those things to unfold. And it's the journey versus the destination, right? It's that
Yes.
journey versus the destination. Some people want that destination and they don't enjoy the journey as it unfolds.
If I could just add to that, and this is my own personal experience, because you mentioned something really important, the profit side. In early days, the profits were not there. In early days, it was how do I pay the rent? How do I find something cheap to eat? Those were realistic life experiences back then. But then when the profits started happening, it was like a sense of entitlement. Like, I've earned this, I've worked for this, I've sacrificed for years. So yes, profit is important. Now I need to go subconsciously go out to spend it so I can validate myself because this is what I've been doing this for all along. And in that process, I lost my direction.
Oh.
I lost my direction because now I was too busy showing off, perhaps at a subconscious level. Look what I've achieved. See all these sacrifices I've made. Now I'm driving the nice car. Now I bought a boat. Now I'm wearing a nice watch. And there's nothing wrong with having all of those things. But if that's how we're going to define demonstrating our value, it's not sustainable. And it's going to lead us down to a path of, as I mentioned, for me, it was a sense of entitlement because now I paid the price. And entitlement is the opposite of gratitude. It is the first step towards a downtrend. And I didn't realize it back then because I was much younger, but I'm very conscious of this today, that the moment I feel like I deserve it, a little warning light goes on in my head and say, I don't deserve it. Maybe I've earned it and I should be grateful for it, but there's more to be done in order to keep this up. So to your point about profit, yes, it is important because you need to be able to celebrate a little bit, especially when you pay the price in many other ways at the beginning, but it shouldn't be the sole way you demonstrate your value.
Yes, yes. And that's like, for me, it's about people and profit. And when you read articles, they always say those companies that measure profit, sure, profit will come. But those companies that use metrics that include people and profit, whether it's your client people or your employee people, those actually have higher percentages of profit, higher percentages of sales. So it is so important to have that. And I think I was along for the ride early because my husband cared about the people side. He said, engineers, they usually work for 2 years and they're just doing the same old thing. And after 2 years, they say, I've got enough experience now, I need to move on. And he said, I don't want that for our company. I want people to feel that they have a place where they can continue to grow and make a difference. And so based on that premise, that was a joy for me. I started my career as a nurse, so I'm a caring person. And that was the beauty of our company. I think when you care about the people, then you have people who are engaged, who want to continue to stay. And then because they continue to stay, they know what to do. They've got the longevity, the client relationships. So everything just goes. The minute you start to care more about your profit and less about how you get that and treat people like a commodity, then you start to lose a lot of perception from clients and a lot of perception from other employees that this is not the place to be, and things can spiral. Yeah. So we've kind of hinted on once you start to grow, you have people and you have more clients. What would some of those people are probably thinking, well, how do I know when it's the right time to hire my first employee or the next employee? Like, how would you know when it was time to say, well, we need another 2 people, one to cover the Europe and the rest of it, and one to cover North America. We can't do it all by ourselves.
Some of it came to us naturally where these could be clients who went to some of our events, for example, and saying, hey, I really like what you do. How do I get involved in your type of business? And in many cases, they wouldn't show up as employees per se, but they would volunteer. And perhaps they had a level of success in their profession and felt it was important to give back and be around like-minded people, and they would continuously show up. And invariably, they demonstrated a level of value where they were bringing to us ideas or perhaps resources that we weren't aware of that we needed. And so naturally, it made sense for them to become a part of the team. In some cases, this was on contract as opposed to a full-fledged employee. And then eventually, some of them ended up becoming employees. There is a level, though, when you are growing your business and scaling it up, where you're going to have to take a leap of faith, or maybe the level of receivables and the cash flow that is required to bring in the talent that you really need may not quite be there yet. So you're securing additional funding through other sources, taking on good debt in order to build that revenue stream and cash flow for the future. So it's important to realize that if you're in that situation, that don't let the fear of going into good debt hold you back from making the right decision as far as bringing on the talent that you know you need. Because eventually, if you're onboarded the right way, and this term hiring for cultural fit, as long as you're following those core principles, it will definitely pay you back in spades. And I like to tie back quickly to that message about taking care of people. If you are having people that are coming on to you to on board, but they're volunteering, it's important to show your respect and appreciation for their efforts, because down the road, when those people are part of your organization on a full-time level and you face those hardships and financial crises type of situations, those are the ones that are likely going to stand by your side while the others have left for the exits. And I've had that happen many a time over the years.
It's not easy being an entrepreneur, really. Like, I think I think it's hard to, people think it's, oh, isn't that nice? They're leaving early today. But did you know that when I leave early, I'm actually working at home, and I may be up till 2 o'clock, and you get paid before I get paid, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're an employee. So these are the kinds of things that people don't recognize, is that sometimes, some years you actually have to be a little bit leaner, and you're the revolving bank account, right? It's not that people think, oh, this is so cushy. So it is kind of scary. I know that when we first started, of course, it's an engineering business so we had to have staff. But how many staff do you need, right? And so in the early years, a lot of the staff were working longer hours, and we had to realize that, okay, it looks like we have steady growth coming in, like projects, and that the staff are working too much overtime. That's when you bring on another person, right? So sometimes people have to work a little bit hard for you to realize that it's time to bring on another person. And that's one of the criteria that we use. And sometimes you need to invest in your top tier people. And we actually, we got our first VP to support my husband. Geez, we would have been about not even a year old, and he brought that person on. And then, okay, actually over a year old, but that's beside the point. And then we started thinking, well, who else? And we would bring on new sectors of the transportation business. So we bring on a safety person, we bring on a traffic signaling type person, a designer. So we kept adding. And I remember sitting around the lunch table, because we'd have these meetings, and we'd say, so what about so-and-so? Oh, yeah, they would make a good fit. No, this person would fit. So there's this dialogue, the synergies, and understanding and supporting each other. So it's great when you have a few people to talk about building and get that kind of feedback. So I still remember those early days of trying to build the team, and it kind of aligns with what you're saying, Yusuf. You kind of get to know these people, you need to value them, and you need to support them, because one day those people who are just learning about you may just end up being your actual employees and stuff. Let's talk about some of the other challenges. I know you talked about some highs and lows, and that's helped you build resilience. So can you share some of the challenges you felt in your business?
Well, I think in early days, the challenge was really identifying, is there something that I can grow into and develop a lifestyle, perhaps one day travel the world and achieve some of my other goals, as far as early retirement, maybe someday, driving that nice car, feeling that sense of fulfillment. I think for a lot of people, we carry an emotional blueprint since, let's say, we're teenagers or graduated university. And that emotional blueprint becomes our identity. And when we enter the entrepreneur world, we're really reinventing ourselves. But if we carry forward the same emotions, invariably, we're going to end up getting the same result. Like it was Einstein once said, to approach the same problems or opportunities with an outdated mindset or an emotional way of thinking is really the definition of insanity. I'm paraphrasing him, of course, but it leads credence to it. So in early days, and even after that, it was by checking in with myself to make sure that while I have so many X number of calls I need to make, so many marketing meetings? Are we innovating our product or our service? Are we listening to our customers by doing feedback surveys? At the same time, we got to check in with ourselves to say, what am I doing to take care of myself in this process? Today, this term self care is used quite often. It's not just about physical health and mental health, which are huge. Don't get me wrong, those are big parts of it. But part of self care is our commitment to continuous learning and improvement. This notion of emotional intelligence is something that is a lifelong process, it is not a one off. And as our business grew, there was a tendency to think, especially in our industry, because we were surrounded by authors and other business leaders and world leaders and so forth, there was a tendency to think that we knew a lot already. So, do we really need to focus that much on sharpening our saw? And whenever we didn't do that, things got away from us, and not necessarily in a dramatic or drastic way, but we didn't innovate enough. We stopped listening to our employees who were coming up with their own ideas because they were on this path of continuous improvement. And eventually, those employees left, started their own business, and went into competition with us. And how do you deal with that scenario when you put in all your effort and time, you've recruited, you're talented, you finally got this machine that seems to be running well, everybody seems to be happy, they were making money, they were getting their bonuses, but we failed to listen. We failed to follow the advice that we gave ourselves earlier on in the game plan when we were hungry and we were willing. So I think it's really important to make sure that no matter how much success you eventually have, remember what got you there, those core principles, and make it part of your mandate that you not only preach it to others for them to succeed, but that you follow that yourself along the way.
So valuable, that piece of advice. And it just makes me remember that we really try to make our staff feel valued. And in doing so, created that kind of long-term relationship so that people tended not to leave for a long time, especially in the early days. But my husband would take it personally sometimes when people left. And then probably somewhere along the way, he sort of became aware that, yes, these people have other aspirations. You know, maybe they want to, while they're still young, have the experience of working for consulting, working for public sector, working for a different kind of, industry or something. And he said, I'm okay now. I'm not taking it personally. I know that they may be clients of ours one day, and they may need to go to the public sector for a few years, and then they'll come back and realize, I tried that, but I love the pace of a consulting world, and I love, this company. And so he became more aware. I think the other thing I want to mention too is that in the early days, we're trying to make money, and we're very cognizant of money and salaries, and a lot of people wanted opportunity. Well, I want to be a project manager, or I want to be a senior project manager. And at the senior level, you're expected to bring in salary, like clients and sales.
Mm-hmm.
And these people had never done that before. So, do you pay somebody $100,000 that's never done that before? Or do you pay somebody, $150,000? Oh my God, that's $50,000 more, who is a proven track record. They can show you the millions that they have gotten. So, of course, in the early days, we went for the $100,000. And I remember sitting back about a year and a half later, and this person literally had brought in the equivalent of $100,000 in sales. Enough to feed himself, but not the rest of the stuff. So, lesson learned, we probably should have hired the proven person for another $50,000, because they probably would have brought in $350,000, which would sustain the employees that need to carry out the work. So I think that's a lesson I want to share with people. Sometimes paying more for a proven track record is better than helping that person grow into the role, and we save a little bit of money. So I will share that bit with them. I want to quickly talk about successes, because we don't want to say, oh my God, it's all doom and gloom. So share one of the successes that you have. I'll share one, and then we'll start wrapping up.
Sure. Well, I think the ultimate success for us was when I look back, and I remember one of the first books I read from Tony Robbins was Awaken the Giant Within. And the one thing I liked about the book, there was many things I liked about it, is it incorporated lessons where you could go back and enter your notes and evaluate yourself. Where are you now compared to where you were? I think that was a really valuable lesson because when we get caught up in the process of trying to achieve, we minimize our small wins along the way. And that's really unfortunate because it's those small wins. I'm a firm believer that incremental steps taken on an ongoing basis lead to exponential results on both sides of the spectrum. So either in a very good way or in a not so good way. And when I look back at that point, I was 25 years old when I went through that exercise. And even, when you're 25, you think you're 55 because you think, at least I did. I thought I
Very
knew it all.
seasoned, yes.
I thought I knew it all. And you
I know.
realize I'm 6 years out of university. I know nothing really. But then I thought I knew everything. But even those 6 years, I realized how far I'd come in only 6 years. And so today, when I look back to answer your question, what is the successes? I don't think I would position it as one thing. I'm 57 years old now. And if I could go back and talk to my 19-year-old self, I'd say, wow, you've come a long way. You've literally changed the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Not you alone. It was always going to be a team effort.
Yeah.
But you did it because you got out of your comfort zone. You embraced fear and uncertainty. You rode the waves of success only to fall on your face, but you got up and you realized that you got up because you love doing what you're doing. And I think that's what I would define as a success, that I love the idea of making a difference in people's lives because it teaches me the value of making a difference in my own life along the way. That notion of lead by example, but also realize that, hey, we've got a finite piece of time on this beautiful planet of ours. It's the onus is on us to be literally the best we can be in every single moment. And then if we live along that, and it's a subjective definition of what it means for you or for me to be the best we can be. But if we are trying 100%, realizing that there are days that we're going to feel like we fall on our face, but we get back up and we keep pushing forward, then that's a success. And then when we evaluate, whether it's on a yearly basis, reviewing goals, hopefully it's more than that, we'll feel really good about our lives because we'll be able to see. I think Steve Jobs, and going back to him because I love a lot of his words, he said, looking back at life, everything you did will make sense. The term connect the dots will become a lot easier because you have hindsight in your favor. But when you're starting out, you have to, again, using his words, do what you love and trust that the pieces will connect themselves along the way. I don't know if that answered your question, but felt like the right thing to say, and I believe it 100%.
I think both of us have talked about, finding your passion and doing it, and then allow the things to flow and unfold. And when you fall flat on your face, that you just get up and you just carry on. And for me, the biggest success was, I shared that, I'm very proud of it, that we were recognized as best workplaces in Canada, top 10 twice. And for me, that isn't, it just happened, right? It was a series of things that started from that day when we said, hey, let's create this company, but let's make it different. Let's make it a place where people love what they do. And all the little things along the way that resulted in this. And we got that recognition the first time on our 10th anniversary. Milestone. We had 7 offices. We brought everybody in because we were growing. And we said, this is a milestone for us. Many of these newer offices are just starting out. Let's fly them in because they are the people that are developing our company. And to me, that 10th anniversary was magical to find out that we had won that recognition. And that year, if I can be sports minded, we also won the volleyball against
Nice.
big engineering companies because we were on this magic mile of engineering firms. So we played against each other, and we also won the after section of the softball team. So we were riding high. So to me, that is one of those successful moments, a culmination of many, many things. But
Congratulations.
Thank you. What's next for you, Yusuf? And thank you very much for being candid, for allowing the two of us really to help entrepreneurs hear some of our stories to help them as they're building their companies. So
It's my pleasure.
next?
My pleasure. Well, I have a number of things on the go. I just released my first book, The DNA of Great Storytellers. I wrote that book after spending 30 years working with some of the best storytellers on the planet. I felt it was a responsibility of mine to share some of the knowledge that I've aggregated over the course of 3 decades with audiences of different type, whether you're a student, teacher, an entrepreneur, or perhaps a leader within an organization. I believe that human connection is what drives performance, our own as well as others, and that we have a responsibility to learn how to become more effective communicators and storytellers, to bring the emotion and the personal vulnerability while also leading people with usable ideas and strategies that can make a difference in their lives. So I'm very happy to have that book out on Amazon as we speak. I'm also in the process of writing my second book, which is focused more on resiliency. And the title I'm still working with, but fundamentally, it really allows individuals to identify the superpower they have within themselves and how to live according to those principles long term. I'm also doing a number of speaking engagements, both privately for organizations that bring me in to talk on related topics on leadership, resilience, health, and mental well being. And I'm also actively pursuing engagements in the public sector because I love meeting people, hearing their stories, and of course, sharing some wisdom along the way. And then, last but not least, I'm taking some time to enjoy a little bit more of life. This past summer, I had 2 glorious weeks in Italy celebrating a friend's wedding. And as I mentioned, the years are catching up. So I think it's important to celebrate special moments. And that's something that I will intentionally make more time for.
I can feel that joy. I can see that joy on your face as you're sharing that. And I think you are speaking to live some of the things that you've experienced, and you want people and yourself to now, reflect on self-care, to continue to build on your resilience. And I've really enjoyed talking to you today about so many different things that I think, entrepreneurs will appreciate having heard some of our stories, because I think people learn through stories.
100%. And I feel very honored and privileged to be on this podcast with you. I know you've got a great story. We had a chance to get to know each other before, and looking forward to building upon this relationship.
Great. Now, how do people get a hold of you before we sign off?
Yes, absolutely. You're invited to visit my website. It's resilientleaders.ca. So that's www.resilientleaders.ca. Or you can simply Google my name, Yusuf Khoja, and it
Can
will
you
pop
spell
up.
that for those that are listening?
Sure, absolutely. First name is Yusuf, Yusuf. Last name is Khoja, Khoja. And if all else fails, just Google DNA of Great Storytellers. You've
I
got
love
3
that.
ways to find me. And I look forward to connecting with as many of you as possible. The road to the future is bright. And I think what makes it bright is people like you and I, and the people that we surround ourselves with, connecting and sharing stories and examples.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and allowing me to share some of my story, because we don't usually get that dive deep into the entrepreneurship of my experiences and as well your experience. So thank you again, Yusuf, for coming on and sharing.
My pleasure, Hilda.
And to those who are listening and on YouTube, checking us out, give this one a thumbs up. I think you learned a lot. For those who are interested in subscribing, I have a host of guests on various topics, helping HR professionals and entrepreneurs build successful organizations. Have a great day and rev up your business. Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gann. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. For more HR tips, strategies, and to learn how you can create a people-centric workplace, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.